Trade rumors are escalating surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs following a shocking report involving JT Miller and the Vancouver Canucks. We're going to break down that report and discuss what this means going forward as multiple rumors are starting to circulate surrounding how the Leafs are getting involved. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, quick reminder, hit that subscribe button if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel. This is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Darius, yesterday was a wild day. Obviously, the Leafs, as we saw in our video earlier today, they won big, 7-3 against the Canadiens. But what got kind of lost, no, not really, it's kind of a big headline, but is the JT Miller trade situation surrounding the Vancouver Canucks. Now, they are absolutely going to be trading JT Miller. At least that's what all signs point to. There's been a bunch of crazy things going down. Miller was going to sit tonight because of a trade that was believed to be with the Rangers, but the Canucks now are allowing some teams to speak with Miller. So this is very interesting now. The big question is, we're hearing some rumors, some reports going around about, we've heard them over the past few weeks surrounding the Leafs and JT Miller. If they want to swing big, JT Miller would be the guy to go for. The Canucks now are allowing teams to speak to Miller before making the trade. Of course, Miller has the no trade clause. There's a lot of things that are going into this, but it's 100% confirmed now that at the very least, the Canucks were willing to make a trade, albeit it was with the Rangers, and it fell through ultimately.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. It sounds like the Rangers are one of the only teams he would waive his no trade clause to, but there are other teams in the mix, and it sounds like the Canucks have allowed Miller and his agent to talk to other teams. So are the Leafs involved in that? I think it could be pretty interesting. A lot of what Treliving has been talking about the last couple of weeks is exactly what JT Miller is, right? But obviously at a higher cap hit than some of the people we've been looking at. Now, can the Leafs acquire him? Can they make it work? It's $8 million, right? And it's not just for this year or next year. Like, he's signed for the next 5 years, right? So can they make it work? Yes. Can they get creative? Yes. But is he the fit for the Leafs? I'm not so sure about that, right? I think there's better, more cost-effective options for the Leafs, although I think he would be, his mindset, his attitude on the ice, at least, because we know there's a lot going on behind the scenes in Vancouver, is insane. He's one of the best players in the league in that way. He's an absolute dog on the puck. So I think he can help the team in that way. But again, if you're looking at everything, you're looking at all the logistics, I'm not sure he is the number one 100% fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But it sounds like a lot of teams are kicking tires. It's the talk of everything right now. I believe that this player, JT Miller, is going to get traded from the Vancouver Canucks, and he is holding up the entire trade market. People want to see what's going to happen with this. And when I say people, I mean GMs around the league want to see what happens with this to kind of gauge the market for this year. So I actually think this is going to happen this week. I think the Canucks have had enough. They want to get rid of him. They're going to hold on to Elias Pettersson. That's the game plan. And I think that he's holding up the rest of the trade market, which affects the Leafs as well. So the sooner this gets done, whether he goes to the Leafs or not, which I think is maybe unlikely at this point, the faster the Leafs will make a trade. So this actually has big implications on the Leafs, whether he gets moved, when he gets moved, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, the Leafs, I think, will at least do their due diligence. It wouldn't strike me. I mean, on one hand, it wouldn't strike me as a Brad Treliving trade to make a huge move at the deadline. But on the other hand, if he was going to make a big splash, it would be for someone with term that he sees fitting into this core. And we talked about the 2 to 3 year window they have with Tanev, OEL, all these guys. I mean, this would fit pretty well into that. And then it'll be rough when he's 35, 36 with 2 or 3 years left in the contract there in 2027, 2028. But he's been a very good player coming off of a 100-point year last year, which we'll dive into. But Elliot Friedman says on Hockey Night in Canada that he's expected to play. He did play for the Canucks, and man, did he have a great game yesterday for the Vancouver Canucks. A hell of a game. And talks are progressing the last 24 hours on a trade with the Rangers. But now that deal is off and nothing is close. So maybe another team seeing the opportunity and seeing that the Canucks seem a little bit, I'm not going to say desperate. There's been some rumblings that Lafreniere was involved in that deal. So that would have been a great haul for the Canucks here. And it would be an interesting trade as well for the Rangers. But that's a story for another day. You look at it here, JT Miller in the lineup. I mean, he is an amazing player. Is he worth the $8 million cap hit? That is the question over the next 6 years. That is the big, I guess, the scary thing if you're Brad Treliving. And in last night's game, coming off of all the trade rumors, he went 18 for 23 in the faceoff circle, matched up against McDavid. But ultimately, Darius, he would be a very good pickup for any team. But even if he doesn't get traded to the Leafs, it will, A, set the market for some of the big high-level players, and B, maybe give Brad Treliving an idea of what holes he can fill at what cost, depending on what JT Miller, a highly controllable asset, is going for.
Yeah, and obviously his JFresh chart speaks for itself. But Nick, if you can go back to the other image as well, I mean, he is taking on the best matchups in the league as a centerman, and he's winning majority of his faceoffs. He's putting up points. Like I said, he's a dog on the puck. He scored over 100 points last year. He's a playoff performer. He's great on the power play. Exactly what the Leafs need. Exactly what the Leafs need. But like you were alluding to, $8 million for the next, I believe it's 5 years on his contract after this year. That's tough. He's aging. He's already 32. Obviously, he's signed into his late 30s. So as that contract goes on, it's going to look tough. But again, the Leafs are in a cup window right now. There could be some retained salary involved if you really sweeten the pot, because the Canucks, excuse me, are going to have to, hang on to that retained salary for a long time. So you really have to sweeten the pot. So again, if the Leafs want to get creative and really push the team over the top, they can try and make this work, but I don't think it's likely. But again, him not getting moved or this trade being held up is seriously affecting the Leafs, because depending what a team pays for this player, for JT Miller, will determine what, Brock Nelson's going to pull, what Yanni Gourde's going to pull, Nick Bugstad, all these guys. Yes, they're lesser. I'm not saying that they're equal to this player and JT Miller. They're not going to catch or fetch what he gets. I get that, but it's going to set the market for all these players. So depending what happens with JT Miller will have a huge effect on the Leafs and who they get and how much they are paying for them.
Yeah, and you look at his stats this season, and they're very interesting. So 31 points in 35 games, not quite as good as the season last year. And obviously, there's a mental side of things. The Canucks aren't quite as good, but I mean, he's still a very valuable player. 31 years old, will be 32 in a couple of months here, and when he hits, that 32, like you mentioned, his contract's gonna take him deep, deep into his 30s, and that is scary. And if you're the Vancouver Canucks, I mean, it makes sense to trade him while you have him as a positive asset, because if you trade him in 2 or 3 months or years now into that contract, he's obviously gonna be I'm not gonna say negative asset necessarily, but when he's 34 or 35 with years left on his contract, it's gonna get interesting. And we're seeing some Leafs fans clamor for him to some degree. Not sure what's going on with JT Miller, and this was back in December, so a month ago, and the apparent locker room divide between him and Elias Pettersson. But this roster would kick a lot of butt, we'll say, if the Leafs could put together the right package for him. And it's basically just sliding in JT Miller here onto the third line with John Tavares out. If they traded for him soon, it would be the second line. And then maybe if they trade for him, he would remain in the second line. You move Tavares down the third line. You could also put Max Domi as fourth line center if you wanted to do that. Probably best to have him on the third line next to JT Miller. There's a lot of movement that you could do with this, but this lineup looks very good. And I mean, it looks incredible with JT Miller. The problem is the future implications and what it would take to give up or to get JT Miller and what you'd have to give up in a trade for him.
Yeah, you'd have to give up multiple draft picks probably. Nick Robertson would be on his way out, which I think, in saying that, a lot of Leaf fans are like, all right, make the trade tomorrow. But it would be a lot of draft picks involved, right? And the salary. You have to make the salary work. It's interesting, though, right? If you look at JT Miller and how he could fit in on the Leafs in a scenario like this, ideally he'd play center. And again, True Living is saying they want somebody who can play on both sides of the puck. And when JT Miller's engaged, he absolutely can do that. And obviously, like I mentioned, playing the matchup game. He's playing against guys like McDavid, like other teams' top competition. That's exactly what True Living wants in a guy that he's going to acquire. Tavares can maybe move to the wing. They can move things around. I think Domi's better suited on the wing as well. Yeah, so maybe you do Tavares in the middle, whether it be third or second line, wherever he fits, however the matchup is. If he's playing with Pacioretty on the third line, right? Maybe you do McMahon, Miller, and Nylander. That would be insane as the second line. So they could really play around with it if they were, able to make a trade like this, able to get creative enough to make a trade like this with the Vancouver Canucks. And I think the Leafs have a lot of assets that I think the Canucks would actually be interested in. So it is a pretty interesting trade. I don't know if you want to make a trade with another Canadian team. It's kind of like trading with the Montreal Canadiens or Ottawa Senators, right? But it's very interesting. But nonetheless, even if he doesn't go to the Leafs, right? If he goes to the Rangers, somewhere else, maybe a handful of other teams, it's holding up what the Leafs are doing. That's why there hasn't been any trades. This will set the trade market for this year.
That's a huge update for the Leafs regardless. Let us know down below what your thoughts are, and if you want the Leafs to acquire JT Miller, but if not, what your thoughts are on the implications it has going forward for the team. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.